for a lack of a better word, doesn't it feel great to be forgiven? It's amazing how many people go through life miserable because they just don't want to accept that. It's amazing how many people do. We're going to continue tonight looking at some attributes of false teachers. Remember, we talked about 11 of those last week. And remember, something I shared with you last week is just because we might be having a bad day doesn't make us a false teacher, okay? Just because we have maybe every once in a while, we follow after the flesh doesn't necessarily mean we're a false teacher. These are behaviors that are a pattern with false teachers, and this is what Peter's trying to get at here with you and with me and with his readers. And we're going to be in 2 Peter chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 12, and we're going to read down to verse 19. It says this: "But these, like natural brute beasts, made to be caught and destroyed, speak evil of the things they do not understand, and will utterly perish in their own corruption, and will receive the wages of unrighteousness, as those who counted pleasure to carouse in the daytime." I'll spit it out sooner or later. "They are spots and blemishes, carousing in their own deceptions, while they feast with you, having eyes full of adultery that cannot cease from sinning, enticing unstable souls. They have a heart trained in covetous practices and are accursed children. They have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. But he was rebuked for the iniquity of iniquity. A dumb donkey, speaking with a man's voice, restrained the madness of the prophet. These are wells without water, clouds carried by a tempest, for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. For when they speak great swelling words of emptiness, they allure through the lust of the flesh, through lewdness, the ones who have actually escaped from those who live in error. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are slaves of corruption. For by whom a person is overcome, by him also he is brought into bondage." Very interesting here as Peter writes, and Peter reminds us of again this first part of that, as I read to you starting in verse 12, is just the whole idea of just how depraved false teachers are. And then Peter moves into just how their deceptions that are there. There's always false teachers. There's always false prophets. There's always false something out there about God. Two of the greatest false prophets that there ever were, I guess if you want to call him a prophet, would be Joseph Smith and Muhammad. Probably two of the greatest in modern, if you will, not really modern history, but throughout history, because of the fact of who they were able to deceive, how they were able to deceive. If you look at Christ never once deceived, did he? He always told the truth of who God is. And if you notice, it's interesting, a false prophet cannot speak of or preach of God the way the scriptures teach, because they don't have that capability. So here Peter continues to look through here of talking about this. In verse 12, generally, if somebody says that you're ignorant, they generally are doing what? Putting you down, right? But ignorance is not necessarily something that is a bad thing until you choose for it to be a bad thing, okay? Because ignorance in the simplest terms is you simply don't know something. Okay, and all of us at one point, and at points in our lives, are very ignorant until you learn what it is we're learning. So here's what he says to them about these false teachers, these false prophets, is that they are very, very ignorant. Okay, and the difference is they don't want to learn more about God. Ignorance is something that is culturally anymore. I just want to shake my head at people. Because ignorance is almost, somebody acts like, people act like, well, if you're not ignorant, there must be something wrong with you if you're not ignorant. When we bury our heads in the sand and we continue to live opposite of who God has made us to be, that's a bad thing. But these teachers here want to be this, like a brute beast. How many of you have ever watched a wild animal just walking through the woods? Okay? Right? They're interesting. I mean, I know that I have watched bears walking through the woods. I have watched elk walking through the woods. And I've watched big animals walking through the woods. And they are brutes. Okay? They don't call a big black bear a Bruin for no reason at all. They don't call a bear a Bruin for no reason at all. They don't call them, and by the way, it's very interesting that they call what we call a pig, a sow, and a boar exactly the same words we call bears. Okay? So they're brutish beasts that just kind of go about their thing. And there's nobody who's going to stop them. There's nothing that'll stop a bear except for maybe a bigger bear or a human being. So they're very brutish in what they do naturally that way. He's saying these prophets are naturally this way. They are ignorant and they choose to be. And we as God's people, let us never want to stay ignorant. Let us want to grow in our walk with Him. Now, verse 13. Okay? Verse 13, it reminds us a couple other things about them. We're either righteous or unrighteous, right? We're either right with God or we're not right with God. As Christians, hopefully we are right with God more than we're trying to live on our own. So here he is saying some things about these prophets. Listen, they might look the part, okay? I always kid around with Miss Drew back there. I tell her, hey, did you know I need our checking account number? Some guy called and he wants to give us $1 million. All we have to do is give him our checking account number. Okay? Sounds like a fair enough deal, right? But the fact of the matter is they're probably lying to us, right? Okay, there's a good possibility. But the fact is that as Christians, these false prophets, they are truly out there trying to deceive others. That's all they want to do. You know, it's amazing how many scams that are out there. I was talking this morning with somebody, Brother Ed, back here at the post office over here. They got a big poster up there that says, if you have to send money because you won a lottery you didn't sign up for, probably a scam. Okay? So people, these prophets that want to try to get you or me and want to deceive the church, they deceive others. So they're ignorant and they deceive. Now, first of all, I want to put an adjective there in front of the word deceiving right there. Because the fact is that they love to deceive. Okay, that's what they live for. They cannot wait to try to deceive you and I. Have you ever met false prophets? Probably. I'm so certain if you've watched enough people on television, you've probably heard one or two. But the fact is God says they're going to be out there. He says their wages of what? Their wages, he says they'll receive the wages of unrighteous. They'll receive those wages as they count it pleasure to carouse. They count it pleasure to do all of these things. Can't help but watch society today and how far we've come from who we were as a nation, who a lot of who our churches used to be. It scares me to think every time I see people who claim to be Christian in Christian schools embracing unrighteousness, embracing non-biblical behavior. And we're seeing it more and more and more every single day. And the fact is that God doesn't change. So you look at this, that they receive the wages of unrighteousness, those who count it pleasure. Look at this. They do it where? Those are words of time. When you remember, when people generally want to do things they're not supposed to, when do they usually do it? At night. Hoping they wouldn't get caught, right? Hoping that people wouldn't identify them. And sometimes that works, okay? In our modern day that we live in, a lot of people have cameras and it doesn't work like it used to. But today, what happens, they just do it in the daylight, they don't care. They don't care. They're not embarrassed. They don't feel wrong. Nothing. They just do it right out there for everybody to see. And if you notice there, it says carousing in their own deception. Okay? Their own deception that's out there. Deceiving of themselves. Remember, we can convince ourselves of a lot of things. Okay? And these false prophets, they've convinced themselves that they're right. They've convinced themselves. I mean, if you go back and you study some of these cult leaders that are out there. In my lifetime, probably the biggest one been David Koresh. I believe that was down in Texas. Waco, Texas, yeah, all kinds, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of followers. You had the people who believed that they had to give all their monies up for something they were going to ride in a car after the comet that was coming across back in the early 2000s. There's all kinds of false prophets out there, and they don't care about hiding what their behavior is any longer. They used to do it in the darkness because they loved the darkness. Then it says here, but here's what it says though. But understand what he's saying to you and to me. It says the whole time they're doing this, they're feasting on us. The whole time they're out there, it says in their own innocent while they feast with you, they're right there with us, not paying attention. And so we have to remember this. It is important that we know what we believe. You cannot be deceived if you know what you believe. Okay? You just can't be. Now, we can become gullible a little bit, but the reality is that if you know something so well inside and out, when a false teacher comes along, guess what you're able to do? Blow them out of the water. All right? So he is saying, hey, this is who they are. And by the way, just like a zebra cannot hide its stripes, a false prophet can't either if we're truly paying attention. All right? We can see it, and we can see them coming from a long ways away if we're paying attention. Now he goes on to verse 14. In verse 14, he says, having eyes full of adultery. So the next thing you hear is they're going around, and they have this, they're very literally here with adultery going along and practicing all these different acts that are out there. They try to, they satisfy their own desires. All you have to do is just give me just a little bit of something and just give it to me. Put your hand on the TV or just send in me this money and all this is going to listen. That's all false. Okay? And literally here going around trying to commit not idolatry, but idolatry. Okay? Physical pleasures they're going about trying to get for themselves. It says, and they cannot cease from it. Because I've heard people say before, I'm a Christian, but there's certain things in my life I cannot help. That is a lie. Okay? That's just a flat-out lie. Because the fact is that he says the only ones who cannot help themselves are the unrighteous who don't believe in God because they don't have the power of God living in them to take that desire away. Okay? We choose to hold on to certain things once we become Christians. We choose to hold on to them. God says what? He says, take my yoke upon you. I'll carry the burden with you. I'll take care of you. But what do we say? We say, hey, God, I want to hold on to that part. And God said, but wait a minute, that's not how it's supposed to work. I died for you, I lived for you, I rose for you, all these things, not how it's supposed to work. But nonetheless, what do? We hold on to it, whatever it might be. It can be something different for everybody. So here he says that they're there. And I want you to notice something here. He says they cannot cease from sin. It says enticing unstable souls. So remember something about sin. Sin is always pleasurable. Okay? That's the whole thing about the idolatry, all these different problems that come into their lives with the deception and all this. Again, they cannot cease from sinning. They can't help themselves. This is why when I hear people say they're a Christian, but their life is just completely 100% a sinful life, they're nothing but a false prophet and a liar. Okay? That's all they are. That's what God says that they're supposed to be. And that's why when I hear things in our culture today, and I hear Christian schools embracing unbiblical behaviors, guys, that school is going to face the judgment of God, and they don't even think it's a problem. Because that's what's going to happen. And God does not put up with sin like we do, does he? He doesn't do it. So he says here, unstable souls. So one of the things here these false prophets are going to do, again, they're ignorant, they deceive others, they're full of adultery, they cannot stop from ceasing. And number 4, the fourth thing I want you to see tonight is that the fifth thing I want you to see tonight is that they prey on unstable believers. Okay? When the wildebeest in Africa get together, the lions and other animals, predators, do not, under any circumstance, unless they have no choice, literally there's nothing else left for them to chase after, they chase after the strong. They don't do it. They don't waste the energy to do it. So what they chase after are the weak. So what do the false prophets do? Same thing. They chase after the weak. One of the things that has always been mind-boggling to me as a pastor for 26 years is how many Christians want to stay weak. Just want to stay weak. It's amazing to me how many of them want to. And then the first thing they do is they want to come back and say, I don't understand why this is happening to me. That's literally, I've heard how many times I've heard that in 26 years. I can't understand why this is happening to me. Listen, just because we become a Christian doesn't mean troubles will stay away from our lives. But when we are jumping into it head over heels, it's going to get us. Okay, so he's saying that he goes after those things. He's not going to go after the strong soul. He's not going to go after that one that says, you know what, I don't have anything to do with you, Satan. But do you know that you have weakness and Satan knows it? You know what your weakness is. God knows what it is. Who's strong? God. So as a false prophet, one of the things they're going to do is they're going to prey on your unstableness, my unstableness. They're going to prey on our weaknesses. That's how they work. And how do they do that usually? They're usually by the things that are brought up before. They talk about being ignorant. They go back and want to talk about, again, sinning and so forth and so on. Are you sure that's sin? Remember, what did Satan say to Eve? Are you sure that's what God said? Because I don't think I heard it that way. Right? I mean, that's literally, he enticed her, he tricked her to believe in a lie that God did not say. So we can see this. So again, they're going to go out there. And by the way, I want you to know something. For me, I want you to write that down when I share with you. I want you to write this down. Because I want you to see something. It says they prey on unstable, new believers. If you've been a Christian for a long time, one of the assumptions here that we're finding through Peter's writing is that you have taken the time to grow stronger. Okay? Just like our founding forefathers, when they wrote our Constitution, they never dreamed in a million years our country would fall away from following God. That was never something that would have entered into their mind. So here Peter is saying, hey, one of the things that he is saying is that he assumes in a right way that you and I as Christians, we should want to grow in our walk and not be new. All right? It's funny. I was talking to somebody the other day who has a little baby. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, when do they now say that, kids are supposed to start having solid foods? You guys know what I'm talking about? That debate that probably goes on forever and ever and ever. Jennifer and I decided when the kids got drool running down their face as they're watching you eat, it's probably time to give them some solid foods, okay? But the fact is, it changes so much, right, Thomas? You got to go down. It changes so much, and they try to get you to think that they know what's best for you, right? Yeah, exactly. Give those things. And Satan, God doesn't want us to stay babies. He wants us to go from the milk to the rice cereal, oatmeal cereal, or whatever, to the pureed foods, to the good solid foods. And too many Christians, guys, we stay where when we get saved. One of the lyrics that Casting Crowns sings is, he says, I sure hope God doesn't find me where I started out. Okay? Let us remember to trust God. You can't get yourself into trouble with Satan if we go about knowing and doing these things and be stable in our walks. It says they have a heart trained in covetousness practices. So in other words, the false prophet, all they understand is coveting. That's all they understand. They don't understand how to give. They don't understand how to love. They don't understand any of these things because they don't know how. Okay? So then we go on, it says, and are accursed children. Right? It's never good to be cursed, is it, to be accursed? No, it's not. But that's what they are. They think they've got it all figured out. They think, oh, we're the best. Right? We're the best teachers. Remember, just because a parking lot's filled does not mean they're teaching the Bible on Sunday mornings. Okay? Just remember that. But when we teach the Word of God, God will bless that. God will use that to grow His kingdom. But we have to understand that these prophets, this is what they go about doing. Verse 25, you can put verse 25 in one simple phrase. They intentionally speak lies. Okay? Why do they intentionally speak lies? They don't know the truth. Okay? The false prophet does not know the truth. All right? Because if they know the truth, who's the truth? Jesus. The way, the truth, and the life. So the moment they come to know the truth, they have to stop telling lies. So the false prophet cannot help themselves but to tell the lies that are out there. That's found in verse 15. They have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam. Okay, think about all the things that come around, and he's saying, hey, they can't tell the truth. They don't know the truth. They have no idea, so all they can do is lie. That's all they can do. Lie about who God is or who God is not. They can lie about who people are and who people are not, because that's all they know. And a false prophet, again, will give themselves away by these characteristics, by these behaviors. All right? And so we have to be very careful in knowing what these are about. Also there in verse 15 is that it says here, the false prophet is always about money. Okay? That's all they want. All right? My uncle, when I was in college, he used to say to me, well, there's no money in that. He'd call me on the phone and he'd say, there's no money in the school, teacher. All right? But see, we all know that life is not all about money. We all have to have it to live and so forth. But a false prophet is all they're going to be focusing on. That's all they're going to be doing, because that's all they understand. Right? They don't know how to tell lies. They don't know the truth. They don't know who Jesus Christ is. And what makes the world go round? Money. Okay? Hasn't changed. Even in Jesus' time, this is what has made the world go round. And they're always going to do that. Remember, all of those televangelists that are on TV. Now, don't misunderstand me. There's some of them that were good. Okay? There were some of them that made a difference. There were some of them who I think had genuine hearts for reaching people. And there were some of them, all they cared about was making sure you gave them their donation for the week. Okay? That's all they cared about. And that's what this is talking about here. Someone that's all they focus on in their ministry, that's all they focus on, is making sure there's enough of it there. And then in verses 16 and 18, he says to them, but he rebuked for his iniquity a dumb donkey. Can you guys imagine that picture? Brother Jim, can you imagine that? There's that donkey talking to Balaam. Right? And Balaam, did that just happen? It sure did, didn't it? It sure happened. How do I know it happened? Because I believe the Bible, and I believe the Bible to be truth, and the Bible says it happened, so guess what? It happened. So here we see him speaking to this, and they're speaking, but they're not really saying anything. Okay? You know, we can use that phrase when we get to the point. Okay? This is what a false prophet is going to do. It says they're going to, with a man's voice, restrain the madness of rebuking of his iniquity, the madness that is there, the madness that is going around. Then he goes on to verse 17. And he reminds us of this. They made some great promises, but never delivered. Okay? That's what they're going to do. They want for why? Because they want you and I to give them money. They want you and I to give them of our time. They want you and I to give them whatever we can to give them. And as long as that happens, we're going to keep giving to make that happen. And remembering that as Christians, our job is to work together, not for one or two people to do the work of the church and of the ministry. We work together. That's why Jesus had more than 2 disciples to serve God with here. And so this is what they're all about. They're going to be able to make these huge, huge promises. Hey, we're going to have a castle. It's going to have a moat around it. All you got to do is give to make that happen. Right? And all of a sudden, look, we just don't have enough to make that work. That's what a false prophet is going to be about doing. Not letting these truths not coming out. Then he goes on. Verse 18 says, where they speak great swelling words. Some of the greatest speakers in the world can captivate you with their words, can't they? Okay? Have you ever heard some of the old speeches from, I don't know, you can go back to historical figures like Winston Churchill. You can go back to Eisenhower, or even John Kennedy, or to Ronald Reagan. You can go back even further to some of the speeches that were given around World War II, trying to support some of the actions some of the countries wanted to do. And great speakers, they would use big words. Okay? They would use big words. Hitler was good at using big words. He was really good at. Stalin was very good at it. Look where it led to. mass destruction, death, okay, from a false person that is out there. Then you have someone who had great speech. I hear people say, boy, this president, this or that president, they gave some of the best speech they've ever given. Okay? And the fact is that these false prophets are going to give these speeches to get us all fired up. And there's going to be no substance to follow. That's what they're going to do. And that is exactly what's going to happen. It says, and they speak great strong words. They allure through the lusts of the flesh. Let's face it. Hey, you know some of how many of you remember getting television and only got like 4 or 5 channels? Right? Okay. I remember the first time, growing up, I didn't have cable television. Part of it is because it wasn't around until I was a teenager. But we didn't have a color television either. Okay? I can remember my grandfather coming over and saying, I got you a TV. I'm going, yes, it's a black and white with rabbit ears. You know, and it was like, yes. I can pick up the channels out of Chicago. I can pick up all these UHF or whatever it's called, different channels and turn it around. But the fact is that, boy, when I got that, I was excited. I was glad, and you know what? I didn't care that it was black and white. It didn't make a bit of difference to me. I could watch television, whatever it is that I wanted to watch. And now, you guys seen some of the television programs that are on there? Lust Island, Love Island. All these different things, exactly what Satan is giving to get people to believe his lies. Okay? It's amazing. And the things that they show on television, on ABC, CBS channels, that, you know, when that's all you got when television was coming around. And now we see these things on here, words flying out of people's mouths as if you're watching a movie somewhere, not on public television. And we have these great words coming around from these people that are coming out there, but they're empty words. They mean nothing. But this is exactly what happens with the false teachers. They can be such a great thing, but they don't have that. But in verse 18, they can sure give a bunch of alluring thoughts to provoke attention. Okay? To provoke attention. When I was in college, how many of you went to college? You went to college? How many of you remember having taken a speech class, communications class? You guys ever remember those? Weren't those wonderful? Oh yeah, they were wonderful. First semester, right out of high school, and you had to give a speech about something. And you had to give this speech in front of all these new students you've never met before. Poor Micah had to take that when he was in college, and they videotaped it. And then the professor would go back and watch the video to make sure that they had a good intro, a good middle, a good closing, and all these other things that are supposed to go along with the speech. But the thing is here, with communicating, these false prophets will do something to get attention grabber. They'll get a hook that is going. So that it gets your attention, gets my attention. This is exactly what they're going to do because they have to be able to do that. And I'll tell you what, it's not that hard for them to do it any longer. It's really not. Because you see, when we take our eyes off of God, the false prophets will come in and try to fill that void that is there. And then finally, the last thing that the false prophet will always do is that they will make promises they cannot keep. Okay? While the promises them liberty, they themselves are slaves of corruption. For by whom a person is overcome, by him also he is brought into bondage. I'll give you freedom. I'll give you freedom is what the false prophet will say. And what do they give us? Bondage. What we wanted out of, right? As we became Christians, we got away from the bondage of sin that held us down. But the false prophet says, I'll do my best to get you guys to believe this, and I can make sure I deliver this or I deliver that. What I want us to understand from these passages is, guys, let's make sure we know what the Scriptures teach. I didn't say you have to have a doctorate level understanding. Okay? Can you get that? Sure. Absolutely, God can give that to us. God spend enough time studying His Word, knowing the truth of His Word. Absolutely, that can happen. And I hope that it does happen, because there's nothing wrong with that. But we have to make sure we understand the Scriptures, because false prophets will try to destroy. False prophets will try to make your life miserable. False prophets want to make you a slave, want to make me a slave. They want to make the church of God a slave to them. And Christ said, I've come to I came so you can have life. I've come to set you free, not to hold you in bondage. So as you think about these characters, now remember, there's a lot of characteristics here that we saw. In fact, there's about 22 of them that I've shared through over the last 2 weeks. There's a lot of these attributes that are there. But let's make sure you understand that Paul also gave us the attributes of a Christian. Okay? He also gave us the attributes of what love should be in our life. Right? The attributes of what worship should be like. Jesus Christ gave us a lot of how we should worship Him and serve Him and love Him. So there's a lot of awesome, positive attributes of Christians that are out there. Guys, we need to know these attributes of false Christians, so when they come in, they try to teach something contrary to the Word of God, and we say, hold on, not what the Bible teaches. Because we need to know the truth of it. And there's nothing worse than trying to, someone would try to stop a false prophet by using the Word of God that we don't even know. Okay? So let's make sure you know it. Let us make sure that when a false prophet does try to come our way, we say, hold on a minute. It's not how it's supposed to be. But I just want you to ask God tonight, God, help me. I just want to simply ask Him, God, help me to be able to pick up on false prophets, false teachings, by knowing you so well that they can't fool me. Okay? By knowing you so well, they cannot fool me. So we ask God tonight to do that. Brother Don, would you come?